All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you!
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Good evening and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts.
I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa. And with me here is a very special guest, a longtime friend and a fellow podcaster, Stephen Platt from the Know It Some podcast. Welcome, Steve.
How's it going, fellas?
What's up, man?
It's going. It's going well.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you on. You had me on the Know It Some podcast.
I did
just a little bit ago. Shiver had not yet been relaunched, and now it is, and here you are.
Yeah, I think you were in the first 10 episodes. You were somewhere in there, and that was a lot of fun. It was great having you on, and it's good to be here, man. I love what you're doing, and I'm glad to see Shiver's back.
Thank you. We're glad to be back too.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of fun.
Yeah,
awesome.
Particularly in the month of October. This is kind of like, you know how
this
like
is Halloween. This is Halloween.
Yes,
Halloween. Halloween.
it's
everybody make a scene.
like how like most people like they hear Christmas music and they're like, it's the most wonderful time of the year, and then us horror hounds, like October 1st comes around and we're like, we don't need to pretend anymore.
Yeah.
We can just be ourselves, right? And so out comes all the horror memorabilia. We can start talking about the Halloween movies, about Friday the 13th, about all our favorite horror movies, and everyone knows exactly what we're talking about, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately it gets packed up and put away until next year. But
then we go back to being the weird guys.
Yes. For those of us that soldier on, we are here for you. So Steve, one of the things that we've been doing here is we've been asking all of our guests, what's your relationship with horror? Where does it start for you? Is there a movie or a show or a character, something like that kind of enticed you to come in and say, hey, this is something that I might be interested in?
Yeah. So I didn't grow up watching horror when I was young. Family took us to family style movies and comedies and stuff like that. Right. And then I think, I would catch horror movies on TV every now and then, on cable or on HBO. The Bride of Chucky is one I remember seeing as a kid and stuff like that. Yeah.
It's a good one.
Jennifer Tilly. And so that kind of stuff would get past the parental screens just by nature of me seeing it on TV. But then when I was like in maybe eighth grade, freshman year of high school, something like that, went with a group of friends to see The Ring. And we got there late and we were right there front row like that. And and I remember very specifically like all the jump scares in that movie and Samara coming out of the TV and the whole deal. And I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. Turns out the movie was not as great second, third watch around, but initial watch right there in the theater, right up front, real creepy, scary kind of a movie for me, not having a lot of exposure. And then, so that was like maybe the first. And then since then, like I really like, I don't know why I like cheap jump scares, but I love that. I love paranormal stuff, whether it's Paranormal Activity or whatever. And then anything that is plausible that could happen in real life. So stuff like The Strangers.
That's a fantastic one.
Just the other day on our Instagram, I posted for my movie of the day, You're Next. Have you seen that one? It's a home invasion one. Man, the home invasion one's for that exact reason, because they're plausible, man.
Yeah.
Like those are the ones that make it hard for me to go to bed at night. Like I can watch Hellraiser and then turn off the TV and get a good night's sleep. But man, yeah, I watch The Strangers, I watch Your Next, I watch Hush, and I'm now I might need to watch them before I go to bed.
And that's definitely exactly how I feel. That's my jam. That's my wheelhouse. The movie that we're going to cover today is somewhat plausible, maybe in some aspects. Sure. It's close enough that that I enjoyed it, and it was kind of fun to go back and take a little trip back in time. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of where we like to start here is with an overview of the movie. Now, this movie, I mean, this Hell Night comes out in 1981, right? This is like right as Linda Blair is shedding her like little girl persona from The Exorcist.
Her vomit crusted nightgown.
Finally got it cleaned
neon
up.
green pea soup.
Finally got it all out.
Yeah. Oh boy, man, I love The Exorcist. That was the very first episode Shiver did.
So
If you are a fan, or if you're not, you can go back and listen because you can hear me extolling its praises, and you can hear Neri and Jeff giving it a real hard time. So so that's a good one. So we see Linda Blair kind of like, shedding this, this little girl look. She's, blossomed, as it were, into a lady, right? And it comes in 1981, yes, which is often called the year of the slasher, right? 1981 gives us Halloween 2. It gives us Friday the 13th Part 2. It gives us some of the other like A-tier slashers, but lesser known things like Happy Birthday to Me.
Oh God, man! Just there's a recommendation I took from you that was just incredible. That was so good.
Yeah, Happy Birthday to Me, the Prowler, My Bloody Valentine. All these things come out within the span of like 12 months, right? So like the saturation of the market of slashers is like absolutely incredible. But this movie kind of does things a little different. It's kind of a slasher and kind of a haunted house movie, right? But it's also kind of a Halloween movie, right? So we don't really hear Hell Night come up often when we hear like the great 80s horror movies. This is always absent from that list. It definitely is something of a cult film, right? So my question is, why is it that that this has happened, right? And what are your overall thoughts on the movie? So we can start with you, Steve, as the guest.
I mean, I don't know. Overall thoughts, I think, is what I'll start with, and just say I kind of like the way that the film started out with a scream, and kind of like, sets you in Hell Night, sets you in like this Halloween-y theme. Everybody's in kind of costumes and that kind of thing. And I think that plays later in the movie when they go into the police station. It doesn't matter that he's bleeding from a spike or whatever. Like, it's Halloween, so everybody kind of like looks like that. You know what I mean? And there's all this chaos. So I don't know that I would say it's plausible to escape with a shotgun from a police station, but
oh my God. It's like, not only did my man just walk into an evidence room and take a shotgun, this mother loaded it while he was there. Like, just put the shells in your pocket, man. You are holding an illegal firearm. Quit standing in the police station.
I don't know what the writers were thinking with that, but
I was like, if
I don't know that
it and nobody hears it, I'm done.
But you can't really sell that, but you would have a harder time selling it if it wasn't this chaotic Halloween night. We've been getting calls about you guys all day and blah 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 blah. Like, it's silly logic, but it's the logic they went with, and that has to happen on a Halloween night. There's a lot of things in this. The whole idea of the four of them being locked in there for the night, and the sound. I don't know what they called it, the sound machine thing that they had going on, like the screamer or whatever, like that kind of stuff. It's all very Halloween-y. And so like, I think it's a perfect film to be talking about now in October. It's kind of on theme with what you guys are going for. I don't know. Overall thoughts on the movie was, definitely a great pick. I had not seen it before and I had trouble finding it. I'll be very honest.
I don't think this one streams anywhere now. Thankfully, there are two companies. One of which I know is Arrow Video. No, sorry, Scream Factory. Okay. Has put it out on Blu-ray recently, so you can still probably pick this up on Amazon on analog. So if you're a collector of DVDs and Blu-rays, you can probably pick this up that way. VHS, certainly on VHS, you can probably pick this up on eBay for a song. But you can also pick it up digital, which is how I got it, and really how I heard about this was it was on sale on iTunes for like $2, and I was like, for $2, Linda Blair, Peter Barton from Friday the 13th Part 4, fuck yeah, I'm in for $2.
Yeah. No, it was definitely not time that I feel I wasted. I'm glad I saw it. I just kind of wish I'd heard about it sooner. I think there is, like, to your point earlier, it's kind of like gotten forgotten a little. And your question, why is that? I think it's because it's, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it, but it's very much a vanilla, like bare bones, like horror movie, if that makes any sense. Like there's not anything. Because like if you watch other movies that are, sometimes like there's something like new and novel to it that'll make it go viral and cement its status. Whether it be, and I don't want to call The Sixth Sense a horror movie, but like that twist at the end of that
definitely
movie
has horror elements to it.
Yeah, right? I think the shaky cam of Blair Witch Project, right? Like stuff like that, like it's iconic. I don't know. I mean, maybe you guys have a different perspective, but I don't know that this film did anything novel, like anything super new that hadn't been done before.
Yeah, I mean, no, I agree with you. I think that when you're looking at this and you're thinking of it as a forgotten type movie, when you look at that run of movies, just the ones that we mentioned here at the top, I think that novel's one good word. I think that another word in it, honestly, is memorable. And not that the movie's completely forgettable, but it's understandable that it would be forgotten when you're in the ring with those other heavyweights. Right. And what we're looking at here is a movie that, while it's fun to watch, it doesn't have any characters that you might think about dressing up like. It doesn't really, like the monsters, the villains aren't anything that you expect to see like come back around or anything. There's nothing iconic that really happens in this movie. Yeah. It was my first time seeing it as well. And this is one that honestly, I don't know that I'd ever even heard of until you brought it up, Dave. And so I started looking into it before I watched it. And I was like, all right, he said that Linda Blair's in here. So I'm looking, I was like, all right, small cast, I can dig this. And so overall, I think it was a lot of fun to watch. I think that there were some really great, just cheesy, stereotypical things that happened in this. I love the font that they use for the opening credits and the closing credits, like the weird drippy blood, the one that like you find on any sort of like local haunted house flyer. I thought that stuff was great. I liked that. I did enjoy the fact that it is part haunted house movie, but we're in right away on the joke that it's not really a haunted house until you start seeing the weird stuff start happening. There were a lot of good elements to this movie. I just think that when you look at it as a total package and, you compare it to something from the same year, like My Bloody Valentine, when you watch that and it's striking.
There's so much polish on that.
Yes.
Movie.
And you can, I can close my eyes and so perfectly picture, the guy in the miner hat with the pickaxe and everything. And you're just, and like so much of that stuff that just sticks with you. This movie, it didn't really have anything like that. It had some fun moments. It had some laughs. It had a couple of good kills, but it wasn't anything spectacular. I don't think that this is going to be one that anybody's going to write a dissertation about. But I definitely think that it was fun to watch. I think they hit a lot of the high points that they needed to. They definitely had a low budget. And, I can only hope they at least recouped whatever they spent.
Yeah. So I actually looked that up, and they did. I guess they grossed not quite twice what they spent, but definitely a significant margin. So it wasn't necessarily a financial failure.
There we go for net money, right?
Yeah, it did. It made money. It wasn't a flop, and it's continued on the the cult circuit. So there have been small screenings in theaters. It's been released on VHS, I think more than once, on DVD and Blu-ray more than once. But I think there is something to what you guys are saying. Like there's these iconic slashers that come out in 1981. Right. Mm-hmm. There's the I think the Friday the 13th Part 1 is obviously iconic, but we don't get Freddy. We don't get Jason until Friday the 13th Part 2, which comes out in 1981. Right. Halloween Part 2, which really leans into a lot of the blood, the gore, and the sexuality that was absent from that first one, comes out in 1981. I
John Carpenter really put it on the table with Halloween 2, didn't he?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of that was that he wrote and produced but didn't direct.
Oh, okay.
I think that year he came out with, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Escape from New York. So he was kind of working on that, but he already started cranking things up with The Fog in 1980. So and on top of My Bloody Valentine and The Prowler, we've got movies like The Burning. We've got Deadly Blessing. We've got let's see, I'm looking at a list here.
Escape from New York was 81, by the way.
The Fan. We've got The Funhouse, Tobe Hooper. What a fantastic, absolutely fantastic slasher. Graduation Day, Home Sweet Home, Madhouse. That's another.
And these are all 81?
These are all 1981. And some of these are like definitive slasher movies, So we have this incredible list of movies, and I think because Hell Night never really decides whether it wants to be a haunted house movie or a slasher, it's kind of got its, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It kind of has this identity problem. And I think that a movie can be more than one thing. We talked about this a couple episodes ago when we did Crimson Peak.
Yeah.
Right. Where it can be romance and it can be drama and it can be horror all at the same time. But I don't know if it did any one of those things exactly. Right. Either way, I really enjoy this movie for the nostalgia, for the throwback. Whenever I'm feeling like, hey, maybe I want to do a 1980s slasher, right? Something simple, something I can kick back with a couple of beers and a couple of friends. This is one that I think about, usually because the response to when I say, hey, anybody seen Hell Night? I get exactly the response that I got from both of you. And typically when it's over, the response is, hey, so that's I kind of like this movie for that reason. It's a quaint movie. It's a nice way to spend an hour and 40 minutes. And I don't think you can really go wrong in that regard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think that this was a really good one to kick off us doing October with, because we've got a couple coming up where Halloween is the theme, right? Like we're gonna ease our way into ones that are specifically Halloween movies, like that take place. And this is one that doesn't ever actually say it's Halloween, right? They refer to it as Hell Night. Everybody's in costume. Things are getting wrecked all over like Steve mentioned, the police station is a wreck. So without ever actually calling it Halloween, there's an element of this movie that definitely makes it fit in with our Halloween series that we're working on here for the month of October.
Mhm.
So how much of the spirit of Halloween do you feel was encompassed in this movie? When you're looking at the movie as a whole, without them ever even saying it's Halloween, how much do you feel like they captured that element of a Halloween night or a Halloween setting, Dave?
I think the fact that this takes place in a Gothic mansion, nighttime, candlelit, everyone's in costume. That sort of thing to me already screams Halloween, right? It is interesting that they never once used the word Halloween, but you have to assume. I mean, this is rush night for a fraternity, for a sorority. This is typically done in the fall, right? It's at some point, early to mid semester in the fall. So it would make sense for it to be sometime either around Halloween or on Halloween. So I guess without kind of explicitly saying it, there is enough context for you to go, oh, okay, this is Halloween, right? And we get very early on, there's one shot as they're leaving the grounds, the rest of the fraternity and the sorority, when they're leaving the grounds and they're locking up, that we get one of very few POV shots of the killer.
Oh,
and it reminded me of the John Carpenter style shots in Halloween, and I think that stuff like that helps establish a sort of horror language, right? Horror cinema language, where it's like, oh, okay, killers often show us their point of view. This obviously goes back to Halloween. This might be, further tying it into that theme of Halloween. I might be stretching a little bit there. I don't know. But to me, I definitely got a sense that this was Halloween. When they go into the police precinct, when Seth goes into the police precinct and the police officer is just at his wit's end, like that's the sort of thing that would happen on Halloween.
Yeah.
Right? We all get absolutely shit-faced on Halloween. Like, this is something that we do, especially at that age, where you were in college, you were no responsibilities, so just get as absolutely trashed as you can get, and this is going to give the police department problems, right? So to me, it doesn't scream Halloween, but it very subtly suggests Halloween in a way where whenever Halloween comes around, this is one that I'm going to put on at home.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the time of year, like you mentioned, like Halloween is probably the perfect night to lock up your fraternity or sorority pledges in a home. like for initiation, put them in a haunted house and tell the story and the whole deal. And like you said, at the precinct, right? It's not just that the sororities or Greek life on a campus is having this crazy night. Like the precinct looks so crazy and busy. It's like the town, like the city or whatever, is having this heck of a night. And then that made me feel, I think, to sum up, like DeBona says, hey, they never mention it's Halloween. I think the fact that they never mention it, and yet it could still get a guy like me to be like, yeah, this is Halloween. Like, I think, if you could fool somebody into feeling or thinking it's Halloween without using the word, you did your job there. You know what I mean? And I think this did that.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely enough here, right? That you get the idea that it's Halloween. So as soon as it opens with a costume party, I honestly, like, you could have opened with that costume party and then show me that it's chilly enough that Linda Blair needs a hood when she's outside. It's like, okay, it's fall costume party. This is Halloween, right? So but so many of the things are. I think Steve used the word Halloweeny earlier. The candelabras, even like back, we talked about candelabras back when we did Crimson Peak, which was in no way Halloweeny, but as soon as you add those in to some of these other things, right? And yeah, this haunted house, And that's the part that gets me, is the fact that it is, this haunted house, even before we learn that there are family members that still live in these tunnels underneath. This concept of being in somewhere where someone has rigged up sound effects and projector ghosts and doors that lock, that you can't do anything with until they flip a switch. That's the type of stuff that I was like, yeah, this is definitely something you do around Halloween. Because honestly, the local haunted houses opening up is my favorite thing about the month of Halloween. I love, like here, take my $30, yell at me, do whatever, slash at me, make me jump, make me cuss, make me hate my friends. I might cry, whatever, doesn't matter. Like, I paid you for this, right? So that was the thing for me, was when they were actually out there running the gags before we find out about the real people. That's when it was like, this is definitely this Halloween, this haunted house movie, because that's what they were trying to torture these people. That, by the way, so is it a fraternity that has boys and girls in it? Is it a fraternity and a sorority? Because they only used one name, right? Like, they just kept calling it like Alpha Rho or whatever. So is it like one that both men and women can join?
So I've never heard of that before. Steve, did you do any research into this?
So sadly, in my other life, I was in Greek life. I was in a fraternity at the University of Florida, and great guys and whatnot. But I did see that there were these co-ed fraternities. Not many of them. Okay. Very, very rare. They call them fraternities when they're co-ed. I guess our patriarchal society wins out there. They're not called co-ed sororities. But yeah, they do exist. They're very rare. That part did confuse me though when I was watching the movie, that they went with that instead of maybe some like fraternity sorority mixer party kind of deal.
Like that's, I kept waiting for them to drop the name of a sorority as well and be like, 2 and 2, but it was just like, no, you're all just trying to be an Alpha Rho and you've got to spend the night in this house. And I was like, okay, so it's got guys and girls in it. Like, I mean, like, it wasn't one of those
very progressive 1981 movie.
It wasn't one of those things that I got hung up on, but I was like, also not something I'm familiar with. So, all right, cool.
There's, I guess there's, to me, I always took it as, because I've seen the movie a couple times now. I took it as a bit of like just lazy writing, where it was like, so we got the name of the fraternity. What's the name of the sorority? No one's gonna care. It was. I thought of it that way because there is mention that that Linda Blair's character Marty is getting a room in the house.
And trading notes for a car.
Right. So it's obviously not in the frat house. It would be in the sorority house, because otherwise, is it?
Yeah, there are problems there if you have
is it
together.
Was his name Peter? The head of the fraternity was like, oh, who's that girl? Right.
Oh,
so he's never like met her before. So to me, that was like a little bit of a okay. Let me do a little bit of like logical like steps here to get to what this is. I assumed it was lazy writing. We don't need to figure out the name of the sorority.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Because what was her name? Mary, maybe.
May.
May. That's
May.
it. Yeah, thank you. Is like the sorority, not the house mother, but the head of the sorority. So to me, that's always how I imagine.
Okay.
That.
And speaking of that guy that was the president of the sorority or fraternity. That guy, like, he did such a great job with the story of the house. Like, getting into that part of the movie, I was like, oh man, this is 80s, right? Like, I'm feeling this, and I can do this. And it was like, and it was funny, and you're having your laughs and some stuff like that. But man, the first moment of this movie that sucked me in was when he was telling that story of the house. I mean, and he sold that shit. Like, that guy was delivering a Shakespearean monologue about the tragedy of this family, and just like the perfection that was like, I honestly feel like the most perfect moment in the movie was when he delivered that story of the house, and he was up with the highs and down with the lows, and he was leaning into the scary parts, and I was like, if this guy is not like, if he hasn't been president and done this before, this is a guy who took his new role very, very seriously,
and
because this guy did the homework, man.
Oh yeah, and there it had that feel of, that in horror movies are sometimes like that, like don't anger the gods or don't upset the spirits or whatever. Like those monsters that are supposedly living in the house, like he was pretty disrespectful at times in terms of like talking about like these mongoloid,
kept using the word
people,
mongoloid,
like
Mork or something.
Gork,
Gork,
and so like it had that feeling like if there are these things here listening to you describe them this way, and so you know what I mean, like you have to have that like taboo, like almost like a disrespect in the story, right, to make it like, oh no, like you know what I mean?
You don't make Candyman angry, right?
We
did Candyman, and like this whole thing came about because people didn't believe in him, and we're shitting on him. So yeah, he very much did that.
It was great.
Yeah, and then, like that but after that moment, I was like, okay, I'm here. Like I can see how this movie is going to play out now. I get it. I'm down. Like, let's go. You just gave me the roadmap, and now I'm on this journey. So let's go. And that moment to me was really when like the switch kind of flipped, and I wasn't just kind of, laughing about just everything about the movie, when they're talking about the girls at the beginning, and points out Linda Blair, then he points out the British chick. And he's like, man, why didn't you leave her behind? And he goes, well, her behind's her best part. How about I keep that and leave the rest of her? And I was like, see, like that was how it started. And I was is this what we're gonna do for 100 minutes?
it's unabashedly 80s. It is. I love the term offensively 80s.
Yeah.
Like it is so in your face about what this thing is, and it doesn't care, because the movie's there to have a good time. And I think that ultimately, that is what Halloween has become in the last 100 years or so, right? And or more. It's always been, a night of drunken revelry. And I think this movie does that well. It captures that spirit. I do think, to go back to that point, Daniel, that I don't think this movie has bad acting.
No, I really don't either.
It's more than just the guy that played Peter. I think Linda Blair, I think, is a legitimately good actress, who I think very very carefully chose her roles as as this sort of like scream queen and B movie starlet, because she saw that she could have like big fish in a small pond, I guess, but everyone else there, like they treated it with a sort of respect, like if this was going to be a very serious movie that would be put out, and I mean, I guess it was, but people going to watch this movie are going to have fun. They're not really going to see the acting, and yet they gave it their all.
Well, like the guy who played the surfer, the surfer guy,
Seth.
Like he was. It was interesting to me because I was so ready for him to be a caricature.
That's Dick Van Patten's son.
No shit.
Yeah.
I did not know that. But I was so ready.
It's on the World Series of Poker now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I was so ready for him to become this caricature of like of the 80s himbo. But then between writing and the fact that he legitimately did a good job with it, even when he was doing the over the top described surfing where he mounted up on her and was paddling out on her and stuff like that, it still never felt forced or ridiculous. It really felt like genuine guy, like trying to get laid, describing what he loves to do. He's like, I drink, I screw, and I surf. And he's like, now watch me combine all three of these things. But it was, there was a like I said, it was genuine. A lot of what we saw, like it felt a lot like when we did a sleepaway camp, and it felt real. These didn't feel like these forced performances, or like I said, or even caricatures of what they could have been. Like that moment with him, with the two of them in bed and him describing the surfing and stuff like that. Like that's something that you can so perfectly envision yourself doing as a college kid trying to get laid, right? Like, yeah, let me find a way to dry hump you while I describe my passion. And because you're thinking it's like, so you're combining these things, and he did such a great job with it. And then as the movie progressed and we got a lot of growth out of Seth as a character, I did keep thinking that. I was like, the acting in this movie is not bad.
It was surprisingly good. And to your point, it was more genuine, serious acting than, let's say, like a campy horror movie like Evil Dead or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like this campy, jokey horror movie. It was very, very good acting. But what was surprising to me is, to Dave's point about Linda Blair being a great actress and all that kind of stuff. When I looked up this movie, because I was much like DeBona, where like I had to like do my research a little bit first because I had not heard of it. I had seen, what I said earlier, right? Like box office, it did all right, but what I saw was the critics didn't like it very much, and Linda Blair got a Razzie for this. Yeah, or she was nominated for a Razzie. I don't quote me that she won it, but either way, like people didn't like her acting in it. And I was expecting, when I saw, when I sat down to watch it, I was like, all right, here we go. And no, I didn't get any of that. Like I got good acting, not just out of the entire cast, but her specifically. So I didn't really understand the knocks on it that somebody might have. And, all the acting in the movie, to be truthful, was pretty darn good for this kind of a movie, like for this kind of a horror movie.
Right.
It's
not winning any Oscars, but
no, but for what it is, it was really, really good. And DeBona hit the nail on the head. Like I felt the exact way he did on that description of the story that the fraternity president did. And that was like, one of the best pieces of acting in the movie for me. And I don't know. I think it's unfair to critique it as much as it was. But if you look up Hell Night, the critics did not love it. It has a cult following, like you mentioned, and it was financially successful. So I don't know why people would be so hard on the movie and on Linda Blair in particular. Maybe they were holding her up to the Exorcist pedestal. I don't know.
I think ultimately how much money a movie makes ends up letting you know how successful it is. We get caught up these days on a movie's Rotten Tomatoes score, or on an audience score or something like that. But if a movie makes money, that means that people are going to see it,
and then telling other people to go see it.
And ultimately that is the best way to see if a movie's any good, not that there are movies that are underperformed in the box office that aren't good, but if something makes money, relative to the time in which it came out, right? Because you can't put something like this up against, like Avengers Endgame,
Right.
I mean, you can't even put Star Wars up against Avengers Endgame, it's a good way to judge that. And one of the things that you said, both of you kind of really focused in on this, the character of Peter, his delivery on the house itself. The house plays such an important part in the story, right? The setting, it leans pretty heavily into this like gothic setting, and in fact the director DeSimone said that he wanted this to be a costume movie where everyone was going to be in costume, specifically because he didn't want like teenagers in like jeans and t-shirts running around this gothic mansion. So he was like, okay, how do we do this? Well, we make it a costume party. And that's how they're going to get there. So it was really just a plot device, this idea that it's going to be in Halloween. But it kind of like gives, I think, something to the movie, this setting, does Garth Manor itself affect the look and feel of Hell Night? Does that help make this work as a haunted house movie? Or does it really not? Daniel, you want to go first on this one?
So the whole time I was watching this, I just kept viewing it as a haunted house movie. We come to find out that the beings that live in it are actually alive. So, so it kind of takes that idea of haunted and turns it on its head a little bit. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily say that it's not haunted just because they're alive. There are otherworldly type. I mean, they're cave. They're these beings that dwell in the caves underneath this house, and they obviously aren't coming out much. So I think that it really does sell itself as a haunted house movie and does so very, very well. I think that there's always that little bit of idea that this fraternity or sorority or somebody, they're doing a moderate amount of upkeep on this house to keep it being successful and keep this being something that they can do. At one point, he flushes a toilet and it works. And I was like, okay, so nobody lives there, but they're still running water. Cool. Hey man, I get it. Right. But
just like the candles being lit when they get there. It's like, did they really go for I have to assume it took a couple of hours to light all those candles, right? Some guy, there's that one guy who was not allowed to go back to the party, to the frat house, and get drunk until every single one of those fucking candles was lit.
There's some pledge who he hears the gunshot to get the lock. He's like, oh shit. He's got the aim and flame trying to hit the last couple before he can sprint out the back door. And so I think that while there's a gothic feel to the house, I think that if I had to qualify this as something, I do think that haunted house movie fits in. It fits inside that box more neatly than it fits inside a lot of other things. There were some fun things that they did with the setting and the fact that they had the house all rigged up. I loved when he was wearing the mask and he was going to do the mirror gag, but she was too whacked out on lewds to even to be scared by it. She's just like, these lewds are hell on my skin. And it's like, really? That's okay. But what's funny is he's just like, shit. And then moves on. It's like, well, that one didn't work. One hilarious thing that this was actually an experience while watching it. So while we were watching this movie, right around the scene where the projector ghost shows up, when she can't get the door open and we eventually find out it's Maglocks or whatever. And there's that really stereotypical Disney's Haunted Mansion projector ghost that's moving towards her. Right around the time when that ghost first appeared, this light randomly turned on in the hallway of my house, right past my living room. So while that moment shouldn't have been scary, I was really on edge. Turns out what it was that I have a fluorescent light above my washer and dryer, and sometimes it just doesn't turn on when you flip the switch, and the switch had been flipped and we didn't realize. But it was this really, where it was all of a sudden I was really on edge, and I was like, wait, what's going on? Is there a ghost there? My light's turning on. And but yeah, so that was my setting while watching, was also playing along. There were a lot of great things about the mansion that really made it seem honestly, the setting made it seem like something that would be fun to be a part of, either to be one of the guys who was doing the scares or one of the people who was supposed to be staying in there at that point in the movie, right? Being one of the people who's staying in there as part of the initiation. So I think they did a lot with the setting. I think that, they very subtly showed us the pathway that he used to get underneath, which later on they used to get out. There was some great little foreshadowing there. It's important that we show you how we got under the house and stuff like that. So there were a lot of good little things with that were those were the parts of the movie that kept you engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, all of the house, I think, helped the movie along in terms of things like that. You said the entrance and exit, all that kind of stuff. But the monster lair to me had to happen in like a family home, because they had like these old timey like family photos in the monster lair, lit by candles in a very shrine kind of way. They had like the family like corpses essentially sitting there. If you notice, like one of their own dead is now sitting at the table with like the family corpses.
Yeah.
Like very, very much this haunted house kind of a feel. I liked it. The one thing I will say is it does show its age as a 1981 movie. Because if you look at like modern haunted houses, like the Haunting of Hill House TV series or whatever, right? And how that's filmed and the lighting and all that on that, and what a dark corridor, let's say, looks like there. And then this 1981 film where it's supposed to be dark and scary and creepy, but the only way that they can film it so that we as the viewer can see what's going on is to have these be like the brightest candles ever created. Yes. And there's like this really bright light off stage so that the stage itself doesn't have to be super well lit from above. And so like there's always like light coming in from places where there really shouldn't be that much light coming in. And it's just the way that they did films back then, and you could kind of see its age there. But considering that this was all takes place, with the exception of the police station and a couple other things, mostly in one locale, it was like a low budget kind of a film. And the way it was written, it didn't need a large budget. You know what I mean? Like, I think the house served its purpose. It was creepy enough. I don't know that it should be any creepier, because supposedly it's where a real family that was trying to have kids and all that kind of stuff once lived. So I think, you can't go too much past the way the architecture was and this, but I don't know. It worked for me, the home. It was scary enough. So
yeah. I mean, it's funny what like 15 years will do to a place, 15 years of abandonment. It'll fall into the state of disrepair, and especially a big place like this, like, it requires upkeep, there's certain houses that, whether it be in, a neighborhood that you because there's a friend or a family member who lives there, and that house has been abandoned for a while, and you see what has become of just the outside in that amount of time, right? So you can only imagine what has happened to the inside. And now you make it something spooky, something where there would definitely be a Scooby-Doo episode that takes place in there, right? And
yes, that's it. It's very
perfect.
Scooby-Doo-esque.
Yeah, it's very
this is the type of place that the mystery machine would either, one, break down in front of, and they would need to seek shelter for the night, or two, they would have been called there because Fred heard there was a ghost.
Yeah, I have to believe that part of the reason why the director did not want them in jeans and t-shirts is because he simply did not want this to look like a live action Scooby-Doo. which in many ways,
the two females, you're just missing the dog. Exactly.
Oh my God, you're
in
right.
many ways, this would have been a better Scooby-Doo movie than the two live action Scooby-Doo movies that we got.
Oh my God, you're so right. The speaker hanging down, making the screams and stuff. This is an episode of Scooby-Doo.
It is. Yeah. It is. They just didn't get a chance to rip the Mongoloid's head off. Who it really was.
Mr. Garth. And I would have gotten away with it too.
The police chief the whole time.
Meddling kids. So I do think that the setting has a lot to do with it. I also like that there's, at least in my mind, some ambiguity there as to whether or not it's actually haunted, right? So Debona, you're taking the approach that that astral appearance, right? The ghost was a projector.
Yes.
But we don't actually know.
You're right. We see him use the control deck
to open the
lock
door
and unlock the door,
right.
But we never see him flip the projector back on.
So I think my sort of thinking here is all of the gags that we saw were just that they were gags, right? And they were very low tech, things like wires connected to a speaker, things like dangling a body, by rope, and opening and closing doors. Like, this is not something that you needed to have like an awful lot of equipment for. But something like that as a projection to be able to move towards her.
That is a good point.
To speak in that way where like she seemed genuinely frightened after she already knew that there were speakers in the house, that they were messing with them. And Marty was a very level-headed girl. So to me,
well, she grew up working in her dad's garage. She's right down to earth.
I think they mentioned that maybe once or twice. It did have a boy who cried wolf quality to the whole thing, and I think that makes the best horror movies where like you have like the jokey prankster boyfriend, and so like the girl's like, oh, this is just another prank that my boyfriend's doing. You've seen that in movies, right? Like here, because of all these pranks in the haunted house, like they don't know what to believe is real and what isn't. And I think it maybe took them a while to realize, hey, there's something actually going on here. I remember at one point in the movie, they're like, I thought you disabled the scream machine. Like I just heard, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
So it takes them a second because of so the astral projection just kind of mixes into that ambiguity, like you said, of, what's a prank and what isn't at this point.
And there's so much that I think is uncertain in this movie that I think number one, I like a movie that doesn't necessarily wrap up everything in a neat little bow. For example, who the second killer is.
Right.
We're not 100% certain.
That's the Scooby-Doo police chief in a mask.
That's right. There's a little bit of that there. Peter does say at the beginning of the movie that they only found 3 bodies, and yet there should have been 4. Right. He says he does mention that Andrew gets away, right? But Marty also says that there's a possibility that there were more Garths that they didn't know about. So who that second person is, we'll never know exactly. There is a director commentary in which the creative team says that it is not, because I always assumed it was Raymond Garth, the father,
right?
That he had somehow lived. Apparently it's not. Apparently it is another Garth sibling. So Andrew is the one who throws Peter out the window, the one who's shot with the shotgun. That's the one who's who he is not exactly clear. But again, I think that that's part of what makes the movie a little scary, what makes it really good as a haunted house movie, because you don't know what exactly it is that's going on, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not knowing whether that was a real ghost, whether that was the ghost of Raymond Garth, or whether it was more the tricks that Peter and Scott were playing on him.
Yeah.
So,
well, and one thing with the ghosts and the haunted house. So we keep talking about this being a haunted house movie, and like I said, I personally feel like that's the box that it fits the most comfortably in. But we talked at the top about how this is considered part of that 81 rash of slasher films. And so when you look at this as a slasher film, the question becomes, does it deserve that labeling, that title? Is it a slasher film, or is it just that it came out in a wave of, like Dave said, offensively 80s horror movies that and so it just kind of gets lumped in with them? Does it deserve to be called a slasher film, or should it be something that's viewed as its own thing in that time? Dave?
I think that it definitely has slasher qualities. I often end up referring to it as a slasher because I think if something has slasher qualities, that's oftentimes in my mind enough. Like I think of the Terminator, the original Terminator, as a slasher.
Okay.
There's a lot of that, chasing that's going on between the killer and the heroine, right? We have a classic, a final girl in Sarah Connor. Even the music, the way it's done, a lot of the musical cues are very much horror inspired music cues. And the Terminator himself is very much like a Michael Myers or a Jason Voorhees style killer. You know, this just unstoppable killer that is hunting someone. So I think that there's enough of that present here for us to call it a slasher. What's really interesting is that there is a surprisingly small number of deaths that are actually death by slashing. There's one really, I think, right? It's May, which is the first death. She gets her head cut off, which, by the way, I think
very cleanly.
It's a very effective special effect, because there's a couple of like what do they call those cuts? Those quick edits,
like
back
real
and forth.
smash cuts.
Yeah, smash cuts. There it is. And in that time, they're able to throw in that final cut where it's just like her head poking out of a wall, right? And there's this fake neck that's attached to her, and so when the axe swings in, it just cuts that thing off, and it is such an effective shot. It is really, really good. But literally everyone else is killed by hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's not a reliance on weapons, particularly hacking and slashing weapons, which is what we're used to in these slashers, right? Yeah. So we get the head being twisted around, which again, I think the special effects are really good on.
Oh man, that the head twisting around kill, like that was one of my first like whoas of the movie.
I actually, every time that scene comes around, that one and May's death, I always rewind and I watch again. Because I'm like, man, but it looks like it's actually his head.
Yes.
It's really, really well done. So there's two that are slashed, because Peter is
scythe.
He catches that scythe in the belly. So
yeah, I mean, if you're talking like method of death having to be slashes, then there's a small number of them, and maybe it's not a slasher film, but I mean, how many subgenres are we having to choose from here? Because I think if you only have a few different buckets to put it in, slasher makes the most sense. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe at the time there wasn't like a lot of other choices for this. They didn't know where to put it. I would put it, like Debona said, in its own thing of a haunted house movie. Because I agree, that's where it most comfortably fits. I think this is a slasher movie in one of the loosest sense, but it has enough elements that I'm comfortable with it being called a slasher film. I just don't think it's what you would think of. If I asked you to name slasher films, it'd take you a while before you got to this one, even if it hadn't been a forgotten movie.
Right. And I think a lot of that has to do with body count. Like there's really, I mean, relatively speaking, not that many people who die. You compare this to some of the the more commonly named slasher movies, and they'll double or triple this body count, and in sometimes even just in the final reel, Right. So that, I think that kind of contributed to this sort of like lukewarm reception at the time. And as the years have gone by, people have kind of warmed up to it. Like, okay, well, it doesn't need to be a slasher, and it doesn't need to be a haunted house movie either. It can kind of be its own thing.
Yeah. And I think that, because I think that you guys are absolutely right in everything you've said. And like I open with, when we're just looking at when it came out, that's what everybody felt comfortable calling it, because at the time that genre was still decently new, right? We were just on Halloween 2. We were just on Friday the 13th 2. Like that was still the new hip thing. But things about this movie that were, that just remind you of that it came out during that wave. We're going back to it being just offensively 80s. There were some great little just tropey type things in this. One, flashlights in the 80s, according to Scary Movies, were hot fucking garbage. Like, the flashlights in this movie are outdone by a single candle in any given situation, anywhere in this room. These are the worst flashlights ever. Like, you're in a fraternity. The one guy, like, part of his character development was like, I'm rich. And it's like, well, then buy a flashlight that's worth a damn. Maglite has been around that long. These things are awful. But they're the girl, the dedication that the girl had to the garter belt, right? Like, she was sticking to that. Like, no matter what I take off or put on at any point, this garter belt stays. Stuff like that just screams to you that this movie was made in the 80s. I love I watched the iTunes version of this, and I love that the transfer of this in no way seems to have been like remastered or anything. No. I loved watching a digital version of something where like there were still like the literal film like track marks that ran up the side, and you'd occasionally get like a green line just like randomly up through the middle. Like,
all that was missing was fucking tracking. That's the only thing.
Exactly. Yes. Like, I didn't have to just adjust. Like that 80s stuff that was in it. That is another part of what kept this going for me. Like, the little stuff like that. So one of the things I love about doing this podcast and doing it with you and the people we have on here is we watch so many of these movies that we enjoy. We enjoy kills and we enjoy scares, but you tend to you find comfort and joy in the little things sometimes. When we did Crimson Peak, some of the wipes that they did and stuff like that were so Hammer horror were so great to me. But that feeling of like I had just put a VHS in on my TV and being taken back to that moment of not everything being high def and just incredible. Like, this, I'm not it sounds warmer on vinyl guy. When it comes to my music, I am very digital. But man, when it comes to my horror films, like there's a beef stew on a cold day, like comfort to getting these 80s films that feel like you're still watching them on VHS. And I adored that about this movie. Like, so, slasher, not slasher, haunted films, our haunted house, stuff like that. The offensively 80s part of this movie is where I'm like, you can label this whatever you want. It was comforting and it was fun to watch. And I loved that bit of
it. Yeah. You kind of nailed it, man. That's something that that always gets me, that sort of nostalgia that you feel, when you, to me, it's like 80s action movies as well. There is something beautiful about seeing it in high definition and seeing those explosions and the gunshots and all that. But I learned to love this stuff in soft focus. I learned to love this stuff with degrading film stock.
Yes.
And that's part of what makes slashers. Part of why we watch these movies is for that sort of comfort, like you said. Every now and then I'll just pop on a weird one, something weird like Don't Go in the House. Why would I put that on? It's not anywhere near as good as any of the other spate of slashers that came out in the 80s. Because it's comforting. We've got Andy Chacon who came in here and says, "Hi, Steve.
How's it going?"
And one more thing to the slasher element that I forgot to mention. I just looked down at my notes and saw here. You were talking about that idea of the being chased by a powerful figure, fitting into that slasher mold. There was a really great scene that sold that slasher label when they're sitting in the bedroom and they're guarding the door, right? They've got the pitchfork and they've got the chair wedged up under the door, and you see the rug slowly start to rise up, and just really slowly you watch not only the form of a human, but of a massive human suddenly start to come up out of the floor. And that scene, that exact scene would fit in any Halloween or Friday the 13th movie without a doubt. If you took that exact scene, but when you pulled back the rug, it was Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, you would never question whether or not that scene belonged in one of those movies. So there's a big old check mark in the slasher category.
That is actually my favorite moment in the whole movie because it takes you by surprise. If you take your eyes off the screen for even a moment, you'll miss the exact moment where he starts to come up. It's very subtle. And one of the things I really love about that is that the musical cue doesn't come in right as he starts coming up.
Right.
It lets that swell so that, and you have to think of this as someone in the movie theater in 1981 watching this, right? You were having popcorn, you were smooching with your girlfriend, right? And then all of a sudden you look over there, right, as the musical cue hits, and it's like, holy shit, he's there. How did he get there? You know, it's a blink and you miss it moment that makes you want to go back and watch that movie again so that you can see the moment where that guy comes up. It's a brilliant piece of suspense that's written in there, that's well directed, well executed. And since I'm talking about music, I think the music in this is fantastic. It's a real throwback to like the Hammer horror style music. You know, it kind of eschews the synth score. I'm a huge fan of the synth score. I think we've talked before about my love for John Carpenter's music, but I really like that this kind of went back and did like the opposite of the slasher and just went like, hey, let's kick it old school.
Yeah, they were like, we got a keyboard and a theremin.
But like all other slashers, right? We must talk about blood and boobs, right? We talk about it every single time that we do slashers, right? Blood and boobs. So how does this fare in relation to other slashers, other horror movies? How's the blood and guts? How's the sex and the objectification of the women in the movie? How does this stack up with other slashers of the time?
You're looking at me first?
Sure. Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't look at anybody.
You forgot to throw it. It was like,
let's go Daniel first on this.
Okay. This movie, for as fun as it was, and for when it was being made, stacked up against its compatriots of 81 and the late 70s, was very mild on both blood and boobs. We didn't see a single nipple unless I blinked and missed one. Right?
No, you did not.
We definitely got some Linda Blair's got a really, really nice tracts of land that that bounce and heave as she's running around this house. It was interesting. We always look at this from the angle of objectifying women as well. And so the British girl, Marty?
Denise,
there we go.
Yeah.
The names all, like, Seth was the only name that I could remember in this one. Anyway, so Denise.
Well, he had to keep repeating it for Denise.
Yeah, exactly. That is true. He did have to keep it. That is why. That's probably why.
Yeah.
So we get this image of her right away as, she's dressed as a flapper girl and everybody's trying to get with her. And she's like, oh yeah, frisk me before you leave. And oh, let's go upstairs. But then they get up there and she's like, so tell me about surfing. And it's like, okay, yeah, sure. Let's develop this character a little bit more beyond just being the floozy. So, we get her in lingerie essentially the whole time. Like I said, we get Linda Blair. It's kind of starting to get unbuttoned a little bit there, but doesn't get too far. So boobs wise, the count's real low, but the sexuality that was used well. It never reached the point where it just felt overly horny. And as far as the blood goes, most of the kills were decently bloodless. I mean, there were a couple, really good ones when the guy gets his, his head ripped around and stuff and he falls down. There's a decent amount, but it wasn't a gore fest. I mean, nowhere close to a gore fest. It really wasn't gory at all. There was what was interesting to me was the most tense that I got waiting for a kill or an injury didn't even happen. But damn it, when Seth was climbing over that fence, I was so tense up, and I was like, I swear to God, if this guy takes one of these razor sharp spikes to the gooch, I'm gonna have to pause it. Because I was waiting to feel that, praying that it wouldn't happen. And he did make it over, just, minor shoulder injury. But God, when he was climbing over that fence, that was possibly the tensest I was for the whole movie. So, comparatively it's low, but I think that all of what they did was done effectively.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it was pretty mild, some blood to the shoulder, stuff like that. Very, very mild on both categories there. I got to be a little careful in how I respond because, not everybody's asleep in the house, but yeah, no, I mean, aside from garter and legs, there wasn't much going on that category. And then, not a lot of blood, not a lot of gore. I thought that it was pretty tasteful because sometimes if there's too much gore, it can feel like the horror equivalent of a Michael Bay action movie, where it's we don't have anything, so we're just going to throw a bunch of syrupy blood at the screen. And here they clearly felt, hey, look, we have a story to tell. We don't need to just cover it up and compensate in that manner. I'm kind of surprised that there wasn't more sexuality to this because it's an 80s slasher, but
Well, and especially when it opens, in that party, we're immediately okay, drunken frat boy, setting, all right,
somebody's getting lucky.
Somebody's getting lucky. And then, maybe they did. There was this weird moment where they were asleep and then awake, and then later on going back to, then they were fooling around again. So,
but we never saw it.
Yeah.
No, and they had the perfect opportunity. They're in a home. It's fully furnished, running water.
Remarkably not dusty.
It's just crazy.
Can you imagine both those Garth boys just sitting there dusting things year round
and paying their water bill because very responsible.
There's just an envelope with an address scrawled and $30 in cash left on the county's doorstep. Well, I guess we should pay their water bill with this.
But they're illiterate. They never learned to write, so it's just these weird markings, right? And so someone gets this and they're like, hey, I guess the Garth boys are bringing their their water bill again,
dude.
So I think that the lack of blood and boobs in this is a large part of why this movie is forgotten.
So are you saying sex sells?
Yeah. What a novel concept, yeah.
And it turns out everyone's buying.
Yeah.
Because this movie it was marketed as a slasher, right? And because it gets lumped in with these slashers, but it doesn't really play by the slasher rules. It was one of those where people maybe thought, okay, well, where was the blood? Where were the boobs? Because that's what we came for, right? And when it's not there, you still feel like you had a good time with the movie because it was funny, right? Because I think the kills were memorable. How many movies has the guy died because he was literally thrown out of a window by a fucking Sasquatch, right? or Bigfoot or whatever the fuck this guy is, right? So I think that that's part of it, right? Where I really liked that we didn't have to rely on that stuff, because although I do love gore and I do love the sexiness that's brought on by these movies, sometimes it is a breath of fresh air to like not have the women objectified in one of these things, to actually try to develop a character, give her a backstory, right? Like, oh, maybe she's smart, right? Like she's a mechanic, which
I'm really
which
good
not
at English lit. Takes the best notes. The best notes.
and not only is that like does it play into the like the plot later where she's able to like figure out what's going on with this car like right away and hotwire it and get it to run, right? And so it's not just a plot device. I think like thematically there's also some things going on there, like some class structure. There's got to be some commentary there that wasn't truly developed, I think, with how college is so expensive that a working class person has to do someone's notes to be able to afford to live
or to live Greek life, especially.
Yeah, and then the rich boy kind of has everything handed to him, so there's dimension there to the characters, and if that means that that we don't get to see Linda Blair's boobies, then okay. I'm okay with that. So the blood and boobs surprisingly low on here, but I don't think that it detracts from it. I think that I think that it detracted from the mythos of the movie early on. And now that it's kind of cemented itself as this sort of cult classic, you can watch the movie and say, "Oh, okay, that's really cool." We really only get, the blood,
well,
when we see Denise's head in the bed, not even, when she's actually going to be decapitated, and by the way, what a great scene when they stumble upon that table downstairs in the caves. And Denise is there with her head like sewn back on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another fantastic scene there.
Yeah, like I said earlier, that monster lair was great for me. I loved the family photos and the candles and the whole. It was just very creepy, and that's what you want your monster's lair to be. A little shrine to something and the whole deal, and it was great. I don't know. Are we gonna talk about the end of the movie later, or can I bring up something?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
We're wrapping up.
So okay, well, if we're wrapping up, like the ending to the movie, I'm not gonna completely like shit all over it here, but the driving that she does without at all having her eyes on the road whatsoever, kind of deal. Like she's panicking, she's monstering the whole deal. But like if you look at the car, it's like a stunt driver or it's on a track or something. In the way that it maneuvers, and then she's able to do what she does to the monster spirit on the gate and everything. But is it just me, or did she walk towards the house and not away from the house, like before the credits? Because it seemed as though like she's trying to get out,
walking away.
Okay.
Yeah, because she was watching the sunrise like behind the house, and then as she's leaving, the sun is rising behind her. Like she's backlit, and the sun is rising behind the house. So, which when she gets her, which is speaking of the end, Linda Blair getting an awesome final girl moment. And getting to be the one who takes out the last guy, and then it just ends with her just being done with this and just walking off. It was the horror movie equivalent of not looking back at an explosion when that movie ends. She's just stone faced with everything that's just happened, and that freeze frame roll credits over her just walking away looking like a badass was rad.
I actually really like that ending. That extended chase is, I think, fantastic. I think it's when we get some of the most sexualization in that movie, with Linda Blair discovering the dead bodies and jumping up and down in fear when she stumbles upon that, and all of her jumps up and down when that happens. And I think that it's really effective. I was always on the edge of my seat You know, like, and I've seen it before many times. And I'm like, okay, well, does he pop out here? Does he pop out there? Where is it that this is going to happen again? Especially when she enters that hedge maze. You know, it's not the most iconic hedge maze in horror cinema, not by a long shot. But we do get some really good stuff in there.
Yeah.
So I particularly like that ending.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And especially that impalement at the end.
Oh, dude, yeah. They like all of the foreshadowing of how sharp the top of that gate was.
The hand getting cut.
Paid off. Yeah.
It definitely paid off. I mean, for starting with the story that he told and not being able to get away, then him cutting his hand and his shoulder, like that little tiny bit kept replaying to where it made that kill so much cooler.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
All right. So Daniel?
Yeah. So you know, like as we get to the end here, we always like to decide how we're gonna rate the movie. We always like try to find something that's really unique, and definitely a unique feature in this movie were Seth's heart printed boxers. They were as much a star in the movie as anybody else. So on a scale of 1 to 5 heart printed boxers, what do you give Hell Knight, Steve?
I mean, this is going to sound like a cop-out, but I'll defend it. I gave it 3 heart-printed boxers because while it was not, you know, going back to what we said earlier, like it's not like super novel, not tons of gore or maybe not all the sexuality promised by the opening scene and the party, the frat party or whatever. While there's maybe things that you could say about it, right? It definitely is a great haunted house movie. I like what they did with the house. I like the acting in it was surprisingly good. Like there were enough things in there that, like I told you, like I didn't feel like I wasted an hour and 40. Like I felt like I'm glad I saw that movie. Holy cow, why hadn't anybody told me that this movie existed? Because it is different from the formulaic, you know, all these 80s slashers are the same kind of thing. Like this was a different movie. For me, I don't think I've seen one that is a copycat or mirrors it per se. And so, like, I don't know. I'd give it 3.
All right, fair enough, Dave.
I think that's solid. I actually am going to go 3.5. Because I
Price is writing me.
I am torn between 3.5 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where it's like if we used like quarters on here, like, you know, quarter heart printed boxers, I would say that this is 3 3/4 heart printed boxers, but that's way too much math. I don't math that hard.
How do you wear a 3/4 boxer? You know, that's what I want to.
Yeah. So it would not feel right giving this 4.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It just doesn't. So I would have to, you know, round down to 3.5. And so it's weird because I don't think that it's that low, but I also don't think it's as high as 4. I think that this is a movie that is enjoyable. It's one that I like to watch. I kind of put it in the same boat as like Sly Stallone's Cobra. You know, it's by no means a good movie. You know, yeah, it's not a good movie, but it's one that, you know, like, you know, fuck, I really enjoy watching that movie. You know, and that's kind of where this sits with me, where I really enjoy seeing these 4 characters die. in this house, you know, and of course, you know, not all 4 of them die, but Linda Blair has talked about how much fun it was to make this movie, although it was a grueling process because they shot it over only 40 days, and you know, they had Thanksgiving dinner while they were making the movie. You know, they
at that table downstairs, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. The table was put there for Thanksgiving dinner. They decided to write it in afterwards. So yeah, she says that they really became a group of friends. that they really enjoyed each other's company, and that that comes off in the movie. You can tell. You can tell that this is a group of people that really do enjoy being with one another, and that makes you want to see that enjoyment. So I think 3.5 I feel more comfortable than 4, and that's where I'm at. 3.5 half heart printed boxers. What about you, DeBona?
I think you hit the nail on the head, man. I got to go 3.5 because I did really enjoy it and I thought it was a lot of fun, but at the same time, 4 just feels too high. Mm-hmm. One thing I really enjoyed about this movie, and it's one of the first times since we've been doing this podcast and we've been watching the movies that I've had this thought. And that's nothing against the other movies that we've seen. It's just, this is one of the first times where I've been like, my kids just about, like my oldest kids are 10. And I'm like, my older kids are just about old enough to where this can be a movie that I could introduce them into classic horror with. Mm-hmm. And that gave it an extra half star for me, just right there. Like that, how much I enjoyed it and feeling like it's something that not only would I recommend to people, like if people are like, give me an obscure 80s horror movie that you like, I'd be like, oh dude, let me tell you about Hell Night. I think you'll really enjoy this. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it's a good movie. But also I feel like, maybe next year at 11, my daughter's kind of a scaredy cat, but we'll see. Like I feel like this is a good soft introduction into being like, look at some of the weird stuff that your dad likes. And, I feel like it gets right up on the precipice of being too much without ever crossing that line. And so from that aspect, I liked it a lot for all of the reasons that we've talked about. I really did like it. 4 just does seem too high. Right. So yeah. I'm going to go 3.5 heart printed boxers.
All right. So I guess if we're doing calculations Shiver style, we round up the 3.5.
Yeah.
Right. So because I mean, Steve, you're the math guy.
I would say 3.5. We're gonna go with 3.5.
3 1/3, right? Okay, yeah. All right, so 3.5 heart printed boxers for Hell Night. It's feeling more right with me the more I say that. Yeah, 3.5.
Yeah.
So Steve, thank you so much for coming on, man.
It's an honor, a pleasure.
Do you want to plug your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interview podcast, pretty wide-ranging guests. It's called Know It Some, because nobody likes to know it all, but it's always good to know it some. And I've had a wide range of guests on there. I've had athletes like Super Bowl champion Pat Lee, Team USA's Eddie Alvarez. He actually became the 3rd American to ever medal in both a winter and summer Olympic sport, because he medaled in speed skating in Sochi in 2014 and then baseball this year. So really cool guests like that. I had the past police chief for Miami-Dade and so on and so forth. We're 30 episodes in, really cool kind of concept to keep you well-rounded. You learn about people from all different walks of life and occupations and backgrounds, and I enjoy it. And some people have called it a poor man's Joe Rogan, and I think that's a lazy way of categorizing my show, just because I'm bald and a bit of an idiot. But
no, listen, you are much more intelligent than Joe Rogan.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I enjoy your podcast much more than his. Also, Joe Rogan, would you like to come on our podcast?
Yeah, exactly. His
you ever watch horror movies on DMT?
I will do it. His are like 3 or 4 hours long, right? But he also has people like Elon Musk and Bernie Sanders on his show. Like my guest might not be Elon Musk, but also like I only keep you for like 45 minutes. My episodes are relatively short. So yeah, it's Know It Some Pod. You could find it anywhere you get your podcast, and we're all over social media at Know It Some Pod.
Very cool.
Go.
So speaking of other podcasts, make sure you head over to geekbro.net where you can find all of our Shiver info, as well as other podcasts on our Geek Bro network, including Mount Geekmore with David and myself pretty regularly. We have got What's Up Bro with Neri. The new one, Crimacopia.
Close
if I'm
enough.
saying that correctly. It is a true crime podcast where they're currently undertaking their first season where they are delving into lesser known cults from all over the world. We've got Comedy Fitness, I believe is Here and There, Seasons, and Kickflix. Where they're going to be reviewing martial arts films. I'm on the most recent episode where we watched Enter the Ninja.
I love that movie.
Man, talk about a movie being offensively 80s.
Yes.
If you head to geekbro.net, you can find all of that, or you can find us at shiverpod.com. Shiverpod is also where you can find us on all of your social medias.
There you go. So on behalf of all of us here on Shiver, fright you very much.